Hey YouTube, and welcome to my new series, Mix Monday. So today and every Monday, we are going to be going over a mix. So for episode 1, we're going to do one of my songs. We're going to be going over the mix for my song, Hold On, which came out in, I think, May. This song has 30 tracks, and let's just kind of go through and start to talk about how I mixed this. So first of all, I want to talk about a little bit about my workflow. When I make a song, I start out in a production session. Now I have different templates for production, for sound design, for mixing, for mastering. I use different Logic templates and setups for each of these purposes. So when I'm mixing, I tend to mostly stay in this mixer window. If I'm in recording production mode, I'm mostly staying in the track view. So this is my mix session. I've got several buses set up, and you can see the buses are really doing a lot of the work here. Now, I do most of my sound design for my own music in the production sessions. I already have most of the reverb, most of any effects done in production, and I'm not doing too much of that in mixing. Now you can see occasional EQ, a lot of these utility gain plugins, a couple compressors, direction mixer, a delay, and then in my buses I've got basically reverbs and compressors. So most of the processing work is done during production, and in mixing I'm really just bringing everything together, doing a whole bunch of parallel compression and gluing, and just making everything fit and not sound like it's isolated. So most of the work here is really done with faders. Nice wide range of kind of fader positions going in here. Let's start out and just let's start by taking a look at our drums. So we got around 7 in our drum stack here. And then we've got this Logic Auto Drummer. So let's leave that off at first and just kind of take a listen to what our sampled drums sound like. And I use all samples for my drums. I can't play drums, and I don't want to pay someone to play drums. So I just program everything in using some stock Logic drum kits. I believe this is the Bluebird kit. So a pretty simple drum pattern. In my production session, this would all be MIDI. For mixing, audio is easier to work with. It's easier to add fades, move stuff around. Everything should already be, quantized to a tasteful degree and set up correctly in MIDI during production. So mixing is all about where everything sits. So in my drums, so what I've got here is all of these tracks are in a summing stack. Now a summing stack is basically just a bus that everything is going into, and then you can send everything from the bus, from the stack, to other buses. So I've got bus 7, 1, and 3. Bus 1 is my drum bus. I've got a little bit of parallel compression going on here. Very subtle. It's on a FET, so it's going to be a colorful compressor, just kind of taming down those transients on the snare a little bit. It is not doing a whole lot of work. We've got a little bit of kind of a slapback reverb in here, just very close. We've got a lot of that dry signal in here. So on a lot of these mix buses, I'm actually using these Space Designer reverbs almost as a sort of gate, and I use how much dry signal to control how much of that parallel compression is getting through. So I'm taking a little bit of parallel compression, putting a little bit of a room on that, and basically, with rock music, what I'm trying to do is make all of these samples and all of these independent individual recordings sound like they're being played by a band in a room. All these reverbs are very similar room sounds, and I want to try to recreate the sound of everybody in the same room playing together and all the kind of reverberations in the room and the feeling of that music kind of washing over you. So that's the philosophy behind these kind of subtle reverbs that I have on all of these buses. I am sculpting the shape and sound of the room that this fictional band is playing in. Now, in reality, I'm a solo artist, so I'm recording all of this myself. I'm programming the drums, but we want to try to give the feel of a band playing in a room because we're making rock music. Now, the other thing I've got here is Logic Auto Drummer. So let's go ahead and turn off our drums, our programmed drums. Now, Logic has a really nice auto drummer. It's sort of similar to Addictive Drummer, any of those kind of automatic drumming plugins. Let's just take a quick listen. And so I set this up in a certain way that it kind of fit in and adds a little bit of lift during, I believe it plays pretty much during the choruses. Yeah, so during the choruses, I have this extra second drum kit come in to add a bit of energy, a bit more of that kind of algorithmic drum life. Got a much brighter snare on here. So that just gives us a nice, simple, chill. We got a simple, chill verse. And then once our chorus comes in, we've just got a slamming rock kick come in. On the auto drummer, I've got this kind of LA2A FET simulation by Pulsar Smasher. I've got that basically doing a lot of taming and just calming this down because without it, it gets to be a little bit too much with two sets of drums. So that's just helping me sit the two kits in nicely with each other. Let's talk about, and then I've got the last piece of kind of percussion SFX is this little riser before the choruses. And that just adds some energy. On our bass, we've got a little bit of an EQ, cutting some of these low lows, clearing a bit of headroom for the kick. Now, a lot of times I'll do something like sidechain an EQ to the bass to leave room for the kick, sidechain a compressor for kind of that more poppy, EDM-y kind of sidechain compression. In this track, the bass is kind of sparse with arrangement. We don't really need to do that. We don't really need to thin out the bass or bring out too much of the mid-range. It's really just naturally kind of sitting with the bass. Also, in my mix buses, I've got this bass and drum bus doing a little bit of multi-band compression. So I'm bringing down the mid-range. That's really hitting the snare drum as well as the upper harmonics in the bass, bringing those down, just helping them sit a little bit better together. We're just adding sound on the side. It's so quiet, you can barely hear it. And then we got another small little reverb on our bass, again, just kind of sculpting a room, a compressed hall around our band. Start to move into the rhythm section. We've got this grand piano and pad. Just some kind of quiet ambiance. Now that grand piano and pad is a Logic preset that was tweaked. It's basically a piano sample with a ES2 synth pad underneath. Bringing that up so it's a little more clear, but that's meant to be more of just kind of sitting in the background of the mix. Next we've got our little spook pad. Again, just building ambiance with these kind of pads. Chorus, we bring in an organ. More ambiance. I've got it panned a little bit to give us some width. And then we've got our guitars. So our guitars are panned left and right. I double recorded it, so it's two different recordings. That's going to make them nice and fat and wide, especially when they're panned out. And I'm doing a trick that I learned from Warren Heward on Produce Like a Pro, another great channel. So these buses 8 and 9 here are going to our send guitar, our send from left guitar, and our send from right guitar bus. And so what I've got here is our left guitar, our guitar that's panned left. I've got the reverb panned right. So I've got a Native Instruments ROM reverb here on the airy setting. So what we're doing here is adding another layer to that kind of stereo width. So we've got our left guitar reverb panned right, our right guitar reverb panned left. We're just adding these different frequencies so that everything feels like it's surrounding you, right? This goes back to our theory. We're building a room with the band playing. Some of those reflections are going to be bouncing off in other directions. The guitar player might be moving around the room. We're just creating this ambiance and this effect around us, and we're getting some super wide guitars with this reverb trick. I've also got different EQs on these. So on the right guitar, I cut out some more of the highs. On the left guitar, I'm only cutting out the lows. This is, again, just adding these kind of differences, which is going to add different textures and make things sound really interesting in stereo, because when we hear subtle differences, we're going to be more interested. That's sort of how the whole Haas effect works. So I've got the same reverb on both, and I just change the EQ slightly to help give a little bit more distinction. Now we got this little acoustic guitar solo. it's all set up, it's just got a gain plugin on it to make it a little bit louder, so I have a little bit more control with the faders, and it's not just, boosted up to +5. We've got this spacey lead guitar toward the end of the chorus. Adding a little bit more dimension and a little bit more melody. And so we've got another kind of copy of that spacey lead guitar down here. Now on this one, I've got some interesting plugins. I've got auto-tune on this guitar. I've got it set to full retune speed and flex tune at 100. So it's not going to be T-painting where it's going straight there. It's going to try to naturally pitch correct. Now, I don't remember exactly why I did this. I assume my guitar recording was a little bit out of pitch, but I liked the performance and the feel of it enough that it was worth keeping the recording for the sake of the performance, and then we're just going to pitch it a little bit. I added a little bit of vibrato too, which is kind of interesting. And we just crashed Logic, but now we are back. So we were talking about our intro spacey guitar. Yes, I know. We got auto-tune on there, just tuning up the performance. I've got a little bit of, so Fat Effects is kind of like a saturator, so I've got a little bit, just 4%, just a little bit of saturation. That's automated to an envelope, a little bit, just adding some bass, a little bit of compression. So this is just sort of a multi-effects plugin here, our Fat FX. We've got a huge upper mid-range to upper kind of treble boost here, just to give it a little bit more presence. And then we've got Nova, which is a dynamic EQ. Just doing a little bit of, 250 hertz cut. It was probably kind of sharing a little bit too much headspace with the acoustic guitars. Moves into the verse. We've got a spacey lead guitar at the end as well. PC stands for pitch corrected, which means I did that auto-tune trick during production instead of during the mix. I've got this widened a little bit. So this direction mixer basically is stereo widening. It is emulating the Haas effect. The Haas effect is when you have the same sample coming out of both speakers, so kind of hard panned left and right, with a slight delay on one side. And then the wider you make it, the longer the delay is and the more stereo something sounds. So let's just kind of take just a listen to this. So I like to put this if something is kind of clashing with other things in the arrangement, and I just want to push it out to the sides a little bit. I like to think of mixing kind of three-dimensionally. We've got kind of frequency, but we've also got spatial placement. So we're doing a little bit of space sculpting with this direction mixer. got our left and right guitar, which are just these sort of arpeggiated little harmonies. No effects other than panning on here, just spatial. So let's go ahead and before we get into the vocals, just kind of take a listen to what all of that sounds like together. Very nice. Now, there's a few buses I didn't go over. We've got a string and rhythm bus, a rhythm and vocals bus. We've got our 2 guitar buses, and Esteban bus is a preset for my friend Esteban. However, what goes into the Esteban bus? 11. The only thing going into the Esteban bus is that intro guitar, and that's just a reverb. So our string and rhythm bus is what you've mainly been hearing. I've got a multipressor that I've got turned off. That's just part of the template I use. I didn't use it in this particular song. Again, same thing with this LA2A compressor. I am doing quite a bit of compression on the rhythm section. Excuse me, I'm not doing a whole lot of compression on the rhythm section. Tweaking a little bit. We are adding a little bit of soft distortion. That's a little bit of saturation. We've got everything running through a reverb. So this is mixing in just hints of the dry signal, adding a little bit of wetness. This is glue. This is gluing all the sounds going into this bus into one sweetening little reverb and putting everything in a room. Second verse, in comes these little harmony guitars. When you're making a song, you always want to keep adding something. You want to keep building. You don't want to have the same thing over and over, just loops without changing something, adding a new line. You want to keep things moving and different and interesting and keep the listener engaged. Got these guitars just trickling in from every direction. All right, it's time for vocals. So for the verses, we've got this verse vocals main, a verse vocals doubled, and no backing vocals or harmonies. Now, I don't remember. So for these vocals, I did not do 2 recordings. I wanted it to be precise. This doubled vocal is literally the original recording with a slight delay on it, probably something in the range of 17-ish milliseconds. Usually I'm between 15 and 20, which is why I say 17 right in the middle. And this has a ton of processing on it, but I do that during production. I've got Nectar on here, some subtle auto-tune, compression, EQ. That's all happening for me during production because I like to do my sound design in the production stage. I want what's mixed to be what's already printed. I already got it the way that I want it. So I've got my 2 tracks here. I lean into the fence, smothering the shakes, and I look into the alleyway. So if we just play solo, on one of them, it's a very clean vocal. I lean into the fence, smothering the shakes. So it's a very clean vocal. I might have de-essed that a little more, but then what happens is when you mix in this double, it kind of soothes everything out. A flash of loneliness will usually take me out, and another glass of Fetzer has the corner seeming round. So it's giving us this kind of trippy, psychedelic kind of tone, which is what we were going for. In the chorus, again, we've got a lead and a double. We've got a little bit different delays on our doubled track in the left and the right, so that's adding some stereo width, the Haas effect as we talked about earlier. For the chorus, I added the doubling in during mix to kind of better match the verse vocals. There's something better coming. And then we've got some harmonies. So let's just listen to our harmonies soloed. Hold on for something in the morning. Hold on, there's something better coming. So all of these are going to our vocal bus. Hold on. We're doing a little bit of colorful compression with our FET. We've got a little bit more reverb than on other tracks, both through the vocal bus and through our rhythm and vocal bus. But you remember we sent all those tracks into the strings and rhythm bus to get all that kind of compression and reverb and just gluing everything together. We're going to do the same thing in another channel and add in the vocals. We're just building in all these textures. None of these are aggressive sounding buses. None of these are very loud, minus 29 dB, minus 33 dB, minus 18 dB on the master bus. This master bus is not our stereo out, not to confuse with DAWs where the terminology for master bus is the stereo out. What my master bus is, bus 7, you can see every single track goes to bus 7. This is the final stage of glue. So I've got a multi-presser on here, as well as another little room where I'm mixing in a good amount of that dry, multi-pressed, everything squashed together signal for a bit of kind of unilateral parallel compression, as well as just a little bit of this big plate reverb to, again, shove everything in a room. That is the final step in the glue compression, right? So this drum bus, bass and drums, vocal bus, strings and rhythm, rhythm and vocals, and our master bus are all adding little bits and pieces of vibe to our track. We are creating our room and parallel compression, gluing everything together. Those are the dark arts, the secrets of kind of making everything sound like it belongs with everything else. Let's take a listen to our chorus with all of the parts. Hold on, something in the morning. Hold on, there's something better coming. I wake up in a pile, can't control the shakes, and I gaze into the tile cracks, looking for a sign. My phone at 4%, 0 messages, so I make a cup of coffee to prepare for moonrise. Hold on. Just a super chill, vibey track. Indie rock, indie pop, bedroom pop, whatever you want to call it. Not really bedroom pop. It's not too poppy. It's pretty. We're keeping it indie in this track. We don't have too much going on. The pads are kind of subtle. It's not too synthy, not too 80s. It's just, you know, kind of folky. And we bring back this kind of acoustic guitar solo. Hold on, there's something that intro, we've just got our guitar and the spook pad, and it ends on a little echo. And that is my mix for Hold On. Be sure to go check it out on Spotify, Apple Music, and all the streaming platforms when you get a chance if you liked that. I want to, again, just kind of emphasize how little kind of plug-in work I'm really doing here. A lot of the sound design I keep to the production phase so that when I'm mixing, I can focus on mixing. 99% of the work done in a mix is with the volume faders, right? Volume makes the biggest difference. If you play the same two mixes to an untrained ear and just make one of them half a dB louder, 80% of people are going to say the one that's half a dB louder sounds like a better mix because louder naturally sounds better to our ears. So we can do a ton of work just with our faders, just with a little bit of parallel bus compression, subtle. It looks really big and imposing because there's so many buses, but the actual dB results coming out of these buses it's very subtle. It's just the sound of the room. We're just sculpting a space, and that's really what mixing is all about, just making sure everything sits nicely, a little bit of EQ, a little bit of panning, just to make everything fit. But yeah, that's it. Be sure to leave any comments or questions down below, and I'll respond to every single one. It would mean a lot to me if you left the video a like and did not forget to subscribe to the channel for more mix walkthroughs. I'm going to be doing some live mixes of some client work. I'm going to keep the tutorials coming, and we're going to have a great time learning music production together. Until next time, have a wonderful morning, evening, night, whenever you may be watching this, and goodbye.